The Corvash Empire had been perfecting the art of breaking soldiers for 3,000 years, which was impressive considering most species only needed a few centuries to figure out that trauma and discipline were not interchangeable concepts. But the Corvash were traditional, and tradition dictated that every officer candidate must survive 47 planetary rotations alone on Death World designation. Theta 9, a charming little nightmare of a planet where the flora was carnivorous, the fauna was carnivorousar, and the weather existed purely out of spite. 83% of candidates failed. Some tapped their emergency beacons within the first week. Others lasted longer before the combination of acidic rain, six-legged ambush predators, and the psychological weight of complete isolation convinced them that pride was overrated. A rare few didn't make it out at all, though the Corvash Empire preferred not to mention those statistics in recruitment materials. Instructor Velkan had overseen 42 cycles of the proving grounds. He was a towering specimen of Corvash physiology, with chitinous plates that bore scars from his own trial and 3 wars besides. His teaching philosophy was elegantly simple: the wilderness would break you, or it would forge you, and either outcome revealed your true quality. The weak broke quickly, the strong broke slowly, the exceptional learned to bend without breaking, emerging as proper Corvash officers who understood that survival was not about comfort, but about endurance. This cycle, however, presented an unprecedented complication. One of the candidates was human. Velkan had protested naturally. Humans were newcomers to the galactic stage, barely 200 years since first contact. Their military record was impressive in that entertainingly reckless way, all boarding actions and tactical insanity, but this was different. This was survival. Humans came from a garden world, moderately temperate, single predator apex species, no natural defensive adaptations worth mentioning. Sending one to Theta 9 seemed less like training and more like creative execution. But the Galactic Cooperation Initiative had priorities, politics had momentum, and Velkan had orders. So here they were. The briefing room hummed with nervous energy as the candidates assembled. 12 beings from 8 species, all considered elite by their respective militaries, all about to be reminded that the universe did not care about their credentials. Velkan's gaze swept across them, cataloguing strengths and predicting failures. The Threxian had good instincts but overconfident. The 2 Corvash would last longest, pride would ensure it. The Zentari might surprise everyone, their species had evolutionary advantages in hostile environments. Then there was Corporal Marcus Webb, human who looked aggressively average by every metric. Standard military posture, attentive expression, nothing remarkable except for the datapad in his hands covered with handwritten notes. Handwritten. Who still did that? "You stand before the proving grounds," Velkan began, his translator rendering his clicks and whistles into flat galactic common. "Theta 9 will test every survival skill you possess. You will have standard field rations for 7 days, basic environmental gear, and an emergency beacon. When you activate that beacon, you admit failure. When you endure 47 rotations, you prove yourself worthy." He paused, mandibles clicking in what might have been approval or might have been anticipation of watching them suffer. "The wilderness will break you. Whether you emerge broken or forged depends entirely on your quality as a warrior." "Sir, question." The human's hand was up. Of course it was. "Speak." The informational packet mentioned local flora and fauna. "Is there a comprehensive ecological survey available, particularly regarding edible plant species and predator territorial behavior?" The room went quiet. Velkan's secondary eyes rotated independently to focus on Webb, while his primary eyes maintained their forward position. You will be too busy surviving to worry about botany, Corporal. Right. But hypothetically, if someone wanted that information, you will receive no additional intelligence. Adaptability means working with incomplete information. Velkan's tone suggested the conversation was over. Webb made another note on his datapad. Several instructors exchanged glances in the observation room above. Lieutenant Kresh, who oversaw logistics, initiated a betting pool. 5 credits said the human lasted 3 days. Nobody took the over. The drop pods launched at dawn. 12 candidates scattered across a 200-kilometer zone, far enough apart to ensure true isolation, close enough that rescue shuttles could reach them quickly when they inevitably gave up. Velkan settled into the monitoring station with fresh stimulants and deep resignation. This part was always tedious. Watch feeds, document decision-making, wait for the beacons. The first 72 hours proceeded predictably. Candidates built shelters using standard military techniques. They rationed supplies. They established defensive perimeters. The Threxian, as predicted, got cocky on day 2 and nearly lost an arm to a snapvine. He'd beacon out within a week. Then there was Webb. The human had landed in a river valley, decent tactical position with water access and sight lines. Any competent officer would immediately secure the high ground and establish a shelter before nightfall. Webb did not do this. Instead, he walked the perimeter of the valley in an expanding spiral pattern, occasionally stopping to dig up plants, inspect soil, or sketch something in an actual physical notebook he'd apparently brought with him. What is he doing? Kresh leaned over Velkan's shoulder, watching the feed. I have absolutely no idea. By nightfall, Webb had collected approximately 15 different plant specimens, several rocks of varying sizes, and had dug multiple shallow holes in seemingly random locations. He'd also constructed the most half-hearted shelter Velkan had ever seen, barely adequate to keep off the rain. Then the human did something truly baffling. He started a fire. Is he insane? Kresh's crest flared in alarm. Every predator in 5 kilometers will see that. They watched, waiting for the inevitable attack. Theta 9's night stalkers were attracted to light and heat. The human had essentially rung a dinner bell. But Webb just sat by his fire, rotating the plants he'd collected through the smoke, hanging some, setting others near the flames. He appeared to be humming. The night stalkers came, naturally. 3 of them, sleek 6-legged nightmares with razor teeth and pack-hunting intelligence. They approached the fire from 3 directions, standard ambush pattern. Then they hit the perimeter Webb had walked earlier. The holes he'd dug, not random at all, but precisely placed so that at least one attacker would step wrong in the dark. One night stalker yelped as its leg punched through a covered pit. Not deep enough to trap, but enough to sprain, to slow. The pack's coordination faltered. The human stood, grabbed a burning branch from his fire, and screamed. Just screamed. Loud and sustained and absolutely deranged. The night stalkers, confronted with an injury, fire, and a creature making unholy noises, made the tactically sound decision to find easier prey. They limped and fled into the darkness. Webb sat back down and continued humming. Add 5 credits, Kresh said quietly. I think he makes it to day 5. Day 4 saw the first beacon activation, the Threxian as predicted. Day 6 claimed 2 more, both caught in Theta 9's famous acid rain without adequate shelter. The feeds showed miserable candidates huddled in emergency weather gear, pride warring with pain, pride lost. Webb's feed showed something different. The human had expanded his camp considerably. The pathetic shelter had been reinforced with woven plant material and sealed with some kind of clay he'd apparently made from river mud. The fire pit was now a proper structure with a chimney directing smoke, and those random holes from the first day had become an array of primitive traps circling the entire camp perimeter. "He's trapping game," Velkan said, watching Webb check a snare that held a rabbit-adjacent creature. "He's supplementing his rations." "That's actually clever," Kresh admitted. "It's unnecessary. He has rations. For 7 days. We're on day 8. Velkan's mandibles clicked in irritation. The human wasn't just surviving, he was planning. The plants from day 1 were now hanging in bundles inside his shelter, dried or smoked. The rocks had become tools, weapons, and building materials. Webb had somehow identified which local plants were edible and which were useful, all without the comprehensive ecological survey he'd requested. Day 12. 9 candidates remained. The feeds showed various states of deterioration. Adequate shelters, dwindling supplies, fraying nerves. The 2 Korvash candidates were leading, as expected, maintaining proper military discipline despite obvious discomfort. Webb's feed looked like he was hosting a camping retreat. The human had constructed a water filtration system using sand, charcoal, and woven plant fibers. His meat-smoking operation had expanded. He'd even cleared a small garden plot and transplanted several of the edible plants he'd identified, ensuring future food security. "That's not survival," Kresh said. "That's colonization." "It's absurd is what it is," Velkan replied, but he was reviewing the footage more carefully now. Every action Webb took, every seemingly random decision from the first day, had purpose. The plant collection wasn't curiosity, it was research. The holes weren't random, they were strategic. Even the fire, the insane, dangerous fire, served multiple purposes: cooking, purification, predator deterrent, and morale maintenance. The human had walked into a death world and immediately started domesticating it. Day 18 saw another 3 beacons. A particularly aggressive predator pack had roamed through 2 candidate zones. Standard Korvash tactical doctrine in such situations was to hide, to endure, to wait them out. Webb's approach was different. The human had apparently mapped the local predator territories. The footage showed his notebook filled with sketches, movement patterns, territorial markers. When the pack approached his valley, Webb wasn't there. He'd temporarily relocated to a secondary camp he'd built specifically for such occasions, leaving his main haven rigged with noisemakers that drew the pack in, frustrated them with his trap network, then drove them toward the territory of a different, larger predator. The human had started a territorial dispute between 2 apex predators, then watched from safety while they sorted it out. "This is entertainment for him," Velkan said, slightly horrified. "He's treating this like a research opportunity." By day 28, only 3 candidates remained. Both Korvash, demonstrating their species' expected endurance, and Webb. The Korvash were surviving through discipline and pride, wearing down but unbroken. Webb appeared to be thriving. His camp had become a proper settlement. The shelter now had multiple rooms. The fire pit included a heat-retaining stone oven he'd built for more efficient cooking. His trap network had expanded to provide consistent food. The garden was growing. He'd even started experimenting with clay pottery, firing rough bowls in his oven. Pottery. The human was doing crafts. "Permission to speak freely, sir." Kresh watched the feed with something approaching awe. "Granted. I think we designed this trial wrong." Velkan didn't respond immediately. He was reviewing 42 cycles of data, thousands of candidates, centuries of Korvash military tradition. The proving grounds were meant to break soldiers, to strip away comfort and civilization, to reduce them to their essential warrior nature. Every species that had ever taken the trial approached it the same way: endure, survive, escape with dignity intact. Humans apparently missed that memo. Day 35. Both Corvash candidates finally activated their beacons within hours of each other. Not failures, really. They'd lasted longer than most, but Theta 9 had finally ground them down, worn through discipline to reach the exhaustion beneath. They'd proven themselves and knew it. No shame in stopping. Webb was alone now. The feeds showed him working on his camp with what could only be described as enthusiasm. He'd mapped the entire valley. His food stores were substantial. The human had even started on decorative elements, weaving patterns into his shelter walls, arranging stones in aesthetically pleasing formations. He was nesting. The human was nesting on a death world. The monitoring station had become something of an attraction. Off-duty instructors found excuses to stop by, ostensibly checking protocols but actually just watching the human do increasingly absurd things. Webb fashioned fishing equipment. He improved his pottery. He apparently attempted to befriend a small reptilian creature before it tried to poison him, at which point he ate it instead. Does he know he can stop? An instructor asked on day 41. He's already set the record. He's proven whatever he needs to prove. Someone should tell him that, another replied. But Velkan didn't. He wanted to see how far this would go. Academic curiosity, he told himself. Certainly not because he was questioning 3,000 years of military tradition while watching a human treat a death world like a mild inconvenience. Day 47 arrived with ceremony and shuttle deployment. Velkan personally led the extraction team, which was not standard protocol but had become necessary. The human deserved acknowledgement, and honestly, Velkan needed to see this in person. The shuttle descended into Webb's Valley, and even from the air, the transformation was visible. What had been wilderness was now clearly inhabited territory. The camp had become a compound. Smoke rose from multiple fire sources. The garden had expanded. Defensive structures ringed the perimeter. They landed to the smell of cooking food. Webb emerged from his shelter, looking healthier than he had at the start. He'd fashioned new clothing from leather and plant fibers. His original uniform was clean, folded, saved for the extraction. He was currently wearing what could only be described as frontier casual. Instructor Velkan. Webb's face split in what humans called a smile. You're right on time. I was just finishing lunch. You hungry? The extraction team stood in collective confusion. Velkan's translator struggled with the casualness of the human's tone, as if he were greeting neighbors, not ending a grueling survival trial. Corporal Webb, 47 rotations have elapsed. You have completed the proving grounds. Oh, right. Yeah. Webb looked back at his camp with something approaching disappointment. Shame, really. I was just getting everything properly established. Another few weeks, and I could have had the irrigation system working. Irrigation system for the garden. The valley has good drainage, but the growing season is tricky with the acid rain cycle. I was working on a covered approach, channeling runoff through a filtration. Webb stopped, apparently reading Velkan's expression. Sorry. You probably want the debrief. Come on. I've got tea. Tea. The human had tea. They walked through the camp, and Velkan's tactical assessment protocols struggled to process what they were seeing. This wasn't a survival shelter. This was a homestead. Every element showed planning, refinement, iteration. The human hadn't just endured Theta 9. He'd analyzed it, adapted to it, and begun reshaping it to suit his needs. The shelter interior was warm, dry, and organized. Dried plants hung from the ceiling. Tools lined one wall. The clay pottery held various supplies. An actual table and chairs, crude but functional, occupied the center. Webb poured hot liquid from a pot near the fire into two of his bowls. "It's not really tea," he admitted. "Local plant that's similar. Took me a week to figure out which ones wouldn't kill me. But this one's got a nice flavor. Little bitter, but you get used to it." Velkan accepted the bowl automatically. "Still processing. You experimented with potentially poisonous plants. Small amounts, carefully documented reactions. Standard foraging practice. My great-grandfather taught me. He used to do backcountry hiking on Earth, and Earth's got plenty that'll kill you too." Webb sipped his not tea. "Speaking of, I'm supposed to ask about keeping some of this stuff. The clay pot, specifically. I know it's technically trash, but I got the firing temperature just right on this one, and it's got sentimental value now. You want to keep a clay pot, if it's allowed. If not, no worries. I can make another." Webb gestured around the camp. "Honestly, this whole experience has been incredible. The biodiversity here is amazing. I've documented about 47 distinct species, mostly fauna, but some really interesting plant adaptations. I was hoping to discuss extending the trial period, actually. There's a cave system about 3 kilometers north that I haven't fully explored, and I think there might be." "Corporal." Velkan's voice was flat. "You want to stay longer?" "Well, yeah." Webb looked genuinely confused by the question. "This is the best field research opportunity I've had. When else am I going to get 47 days of uninterrupted observation time on a high-danger world? Plus, I was really hitting my stride with the infrastructure. I had plans for a root cellar, and I think I can improve the trap efficiency by—" "You treated this as a research opportunity. I mean, that's the point, right? Learn to survive in hostile conditions by understanding the environment." Webb paused. "Was I supposed to just sit in a shelter and be miserable? Because that seems inefficient." Velkan set down his tea bowl with careful precision. Behind him, Kresh was making a noise that might have been laughter or might have been an existential crisis. The other instructors were exploring the camp with expressions of deep confusion. Corporal Webb. "The proving grounds are designed to break candidates, to test their limits, to force them to confront isolation, danger, and hardship." "Right, which I did, and then I fixed those problems." Webb said this as if it were obvious. "Look, Instructor, I don't mean any disrespect, but my species spent about 200,000 years figuring out how to survive on a planet that was actively trying to kill us. Ice ages, predators, diseases, food scarcity, you name it. And we didn't survive by just enduring. We survived by making fire, building shelters, planting crops, and turning everywhere we went into home." He gestured around the valley. "This is just what humans do. You put us somewhere, we build stuff. It's kind of our thing." The silence that followed was profound. Velkan looked at his tea bowl, at the comfortable shelter, at the garden outside growing in neat rows. He thought about 42 cycles of candidates who approached the proving grounds as a challenge to overcome through endurance. He thought about the philosophy he'd repeated for decades: the wilderness will break you. The wilderness hadn't broken Corporal Marcus Webb. Webb had looked at the wilderness and thought needs improvement. "Your evaluation will be comprehensive," Velkan said finally. "Perfect marks for survival, adaptation, and resource management. Also a note of concern that you fundamentally misunderstood the purpose of suffering." Webb grinned. "With respect, sir, I understood it fine. I just don't see the point in suffering when you can problem solve instead." The shuttle ride back was quiet. Webb sat with his clay pot, carefully packed with cushioning material he'd woven from grass fibers. The extraction team kept glancing at him, then at each other, processing what they'd witnessed. Velkan spent the flight writing his after-action report. Perfect score, unprecedented performance, concerning implications for future trial design. The human had not merely survived. He had demonstrated that survival for his species was merely the starting point. Given time, they would terraform. Given resources, they would build. Given a death world, they would make tea and start gardening. The question now facing the Corvash Military Academy was whether this was a feature or a bug. Back at the academy, the board of instructors gathered to review Webb's trial. The footage played on multiple screens, showing the human's 47-day transformation of a death world into a livable settlement. Arguments erupted about trial redesign, about whether the human's approach constituted true survival, about what this meant for Corvash military philosophy. Velkan sat apart from the arguments, mandibles clicking in thought. He'd spent decades teaching that the wilderness would break soldiers, revealing their quality through how they bent or broke. The lesson seemed simple, universal, true, except he'd never considered what happened when the wilderness met something more stubborn than itself. Instructor Velkan. Webb approached during a break, still carrying his clay pot. I wanted to thank you for the opportunity. I've submitted my full documentation to the xenobiology department. 47 species identified, preliminary ecological models, some hypotheses about the predator-pack dynamics that might be useful for future candidates. You're welcome, Corporal. Though I'm curious, did you not find the trial difficult? Webb considered this. Oh, it was absolutely difficult. The first 3 days were terrifying. The acid rain burned. The predators were a constant threat. I was exhausted, isolated, and way outside my comfort zone. He smiled. But that's when humans do our best work. We're not really built for comfortable. We're built for making comfortable out of uncomfortable. He held up the clay pot. Thanks again for letting me keep this. My ancestors survived ice ages with less technology than I had out there. They turned hostile continents into homes. This pot reminds me that humans don't really have a natural habitat. We just have places we haven't fixed yet. Velkan watched the human walk away, clay pot cradled carefully, probably already planning what to cook in it. 3,000 years of military tradition suggested the wilderness would break you. The human had walked into that wilderness, assessed it critically, and started building furniture. Perhaps, Velkan thought, the lesson wasn't wrong. Perhaps it was simply incomplete. The wilderness broke you. Yes, unless you broke it first. The Corvash Empire would need to redesign their proving grounds. Or accept that when humans said they'd survived something, they meant they'd survived it so thoroughly that it stopped being a threat and started being an address. Velkan filed his report with a single additional note: recommend trial extension to 94 rotations for human candidates. 47 days merely allows them to get comfortable. Further study required to determine what humans consider actual hardship. In the distance he could hear Webb talking to another instructor about hydroponics and sustainable agriculture. The human was already planning improvements. Of course he was.